Well, it's so good having all of you connecting with us today. My name is Chris, and we're in part 7 of this series, Complicated. And I just hope that this entire series has breathed life into you, has encouraged you, has given you a clear picture about the church, maybe some new insights, maybe shaping some of your insights and perspectives. And next week will be part 8, where I'm just going to bring it all together. But the driving goal, the driving purpose of this series is simply to, uncomplicate what God never intended to be complicated. He didn't design the church and launch the church to be complicated. It was really uncomplicated, but it was, people like me, people like you, we have a tendency of complicating everything. And that's not a 2026 issue. That's not a United States issue. No, this is a people issue. We just have a way of complicating things that shouldn't be complicated. In fact, as we've made our way through this series, we've been in the book of Acts, ACTS, which is a story about the launch and the expansion movement of the church. And from the very beginning, the mission was so uncomplicated, and then immediately it got complicated. Now, if you're a guest, maybe connecting with us for the very first time, or maybe you've missed this entire series, you're just coming into part 7 now, or you've missed a few weeks, just know you can go to tcconline.tv/watch. You can watch this entire series. You can also go to YouTube. It's available there as well. And we have discussion guides. So if you go to /watch, every individual message page has a discussion guide that you can download. You can go through personally for you. You can grab some friends, family members, and just start processing through every part of this series. Now, last week in part 6, we focused in on barriers. That, again, we people, and this is what complicates church, we construct barriers. We do this in culture. In fact, culture is screaming at us to separate people into groups, to construct barriers, to shove people on one side and you stay on the other side, and then you scream at people on the other side, right? We know this. In the church, this happens within the church as well. And the question we must constantly ask is, how do we remove barriers? Because the church is the ecclesia, the assembly of called out ones. The image of the church is not a building. It's circles of people gathering together. It's all about relationships. And one of the best ways to remove barriers is to realize that mission is greater than method. That's all about the mission. And Jesus was so crystal clear about the mission that we are called to go make disciples, meaning share with people who don't know Jesus about Jesus, baptizing them, teaching them, right? Growing with them, walking with them, helping them navigate their spiritual journey. In Acts 1:8, Jesus says, "You are my witnesses," meaning go tell people my story. And he goes, in Jerusalem, in Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Everywhere you go, you're witnesses. Share your story. Tell people about me. It's one of the best ways to remove barriers is to hold on to the truth that mission is greater than method. That it's all about the mission. And last week in part 6, God intentionally removed a barrier. And the barrier was between Jews and Gentiles. And then all of a sudden, today, guess what's happened? A new barrier is formed. Another barrier within the church. And this barrier, the one we looked at in part 6 was a significant barrier. I'm just telling you, this one, it would have been game over if the church and the leaders within the church didn't gather together to remove this barrier. Today we're going to be in Acts chapter 15. And this is what Luke, who is writing, telling the story about the launch and the growth, the movement of the church. This is what Luke writes for us. He goes, certain people came down from Judea to Antioch. Now, when you read in the Bible, it came down, that's usually not talking about going from north to south down. What they're referring to is elevation. And Jerusalem kind of sat up on like this mountain ridge, right? They built cities, like specifically like the important cities, up high. Why? Because the high ground is both offensive and defensive, the best position. So when Luke writes they came down, they were actually going from south to north. They were going up to Antioch. And we're told that these certain people were teaching the believers. So they were teaching within the church. They were teaching other Christ followers. And this is what they were teaching. Unless you are circumcised according to the custom taught by Moses, you cannot be saved. Now, you talk about a barrier. This is significant. Now, for the Jewish people, circumcision was a mark, a sign of being part of the covenant with God. It goes all the way back to Abraham in the book of Genesis. Actually, you can connect it back into Noah as well. But this was a significant, covenant sign that you were, a Jew, and you were part of God's chosen people. Now, they were teaching that Gentiles basically had to convert to Judaism to become a Christ follower, to be part of the church. You can quickly tell the barrier that's being formed. This is an issue. Looking at grown men saying, you got to have a surgery before you can become a Christ follower. Significant barrier. But they were teaching people this. And Luke tells us that this brought Paul and Barnabas into sharp dispute and debate with him. Tension erupted within the church. Tension that could have divided the church. Going, whoa, time out. Wrong teaching. You shouldn't be teaching this. And you could feel all of this. Now, I want to pause here and connect part 6 last week with this week. We go back to last week and we ended in chapter 11. We started in chapter 10, but we ended in 11. And right at the end of the message, I pointed out that Peter had to go, from Caesarea Maritima, and he had to travel to Jerusalem because, there's this group of, the label was circumcised believers. This is the same certain group that we're looking at in Acts chapter 15. And Paul actually gives them a label of Judaizers. So if you ever see that word Judaizers, same group of people. So Peter had to go to Jerusalem because he was being criticized. They were attacking him. Why? Because, he went into a house of the Gentiles, and that was against the law, the halakha, the oral law. So he went and he shared the story. And it seemed to calm this group of Jewish Christians down. It just kind of simmered it down. Now, we make our way to where we are today in chapter 15. In chapter 15, all of a sudden, the same group, this certain group, this group of circumcised believers, these Judaizers, are now teaching you have to be circumcised for salvation. Horrible church growth strategy. I'm just telling you. This would have stopped the church. It would just stopped it in its tracks. Beyond the horrible church growth strategy, it's not theologically correct. Now, between chapters 11 and chapter 15, we just flip through pages. But what we have to understand is, there's months and months, if not a year or two, that goes between these chapters. You see, the book of Acts is just the highlight reel of the launch and growth of the church. That's all Luke is doing. It's not every detail, not every conversation, not every decision, not every leadership situation, right? It's just a highlight reel. So as we make our way through the book of Acts, we have to realize there's chunks of time in between these verses, in between these chapters. And same thing here. And what we discover is in between chapters 11 and 15, the Apostle Paul writes this letter to the churches located in the region of Galatia. We call it a book of the Bible, Galatians, but it was a region it's located in modern-day Turkey, and he writes to all of these churches connected to different cities located in Galatia. And in Galatians chapter 2, we're going to see how intense this sharp dispute was. We're going to see how intense this debate was. We're going to see the tension that erupted within the church that led into where we're going in Acts chapter 15. This is what Paul tells us in Galatians chapter 2. This is what he writes. When Cephas is Peter. Peter is the Greek name. Cephas is Aramaic. And then Peter/Cephas, his Hebrew name was Simon. So we have Peter, Cephas, Simon, all the same person. Paul's just using his Aramaic name. He goes, when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face. Now, pause quickly. That's how you lead. Paul went right to Cephas, right to Peter, to his face. He didn't stand in the lobby having a conversation about another leader. He didn't stand in the grocery line holding his milk and eggs, going to check out and having a conversation about someone else. He didn't call someone else to say, hey, I got an issue with someone. No. Paul goes right to Peter, right to him and said, hey, we have an issue and we need to talk now. And this snapshot we see over and over again. The Apostle Paul goes to people, has conversations with people. This is how we lead at Tri-County Church. I'm just telling you, this is how we lead. We go to people and we have loving and sometimes tense, but always grace-filled conversations. Why? Because we want the best for the person and we want the best for the church. And this is what you're going to see here. Paul goes to Cephas and he goes, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. Again, can you feel that tension? But remember, tension gets attention. This is what Paul's doing. And Paul writes, before certain men came from James. This is the same group of people. These circumcised believers. He used to eat with the Gentiles. This ties back to chapters 10 and 11. Peter wasn't going to eat with the Gentiles. And God gave him the vision. And God's like, hey, all food's clean. There's not unclean and clean. He's like, all of it's clean. And all of a sudden, Peter's like, oh, I can eat with Gentiles. So he started doing this. But then something happened. But when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to, and here's this same group, the circumcision group, the Judaizers. Fear welled up within Peter. And we see this within Peter from time to time. Think about the story about him on the boat. He stepped out onto the sea to walk in the water to Jesus. He took his eyes off Jesus, saw the waves, got fearful, sunk. Jesus is on trial. 3 times, not once, 3 times. He denied even knowing Jesus. He was afraid. And here we have Peter again. And Paul calls it out. He was afraid of the criticism. He was afraid of what people were saying about him. He was afraid of the tension. And he backed away. He backed away. You see, being a Christ follower takes incredible amounts of courage. And in this moment, Peter shied away. He shied away. He was afraid of those who belonged to this circumcision group. And Paul goes on, he goes, the other Jews joined him in his hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas. Now, Barnabas we started off in Acts 15 just a few moments ago. It was Paul and Barnabas together, same Barnabas. And Paul's saying, hey, Barnabas, a leader with me, a key leader in the church. Barnabas was even sucked into this group. He got led into it. He caved. He was like, okay, I guess we got to listen to it. But when I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, again, this is it. Paul's like, hey, this is about the gospel. This is about the good news about Jesus. This is about what Jesus came. This is about what Jesus taught. This is about the cross and that God raised him from the grave. This is about the gospel. And this is why Paul was not going to back down. Paul was not going to let this slide. Paul was not going to overlook it. Paul's like, hey, Cephas, Peter, hey, you, right now, we're talking now because this is about the gospel. And I said to Cephas, in front of them all, again, not some backroom conversation. He's like, hey, let's pull on our big boy pants. Let's have a conversation because this is about the gospel. This is about the good news of Jesus. This is about the movement of the church. And this is what he said. You're a Jew, yet you live like a Gentile and not like a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow Jewish customs? Hey, Peter, you've gone all in with this Gentile thing. God removed the clean and unclean food. You've gone all in, but yet you still want Gentiles to be forced? That's why he's calling them hypocrites. Then Paul goes, we are Jews by birth. And I want you to hear the sarcasm dripping from the pen of Paul. He goes, we're Jews from birth. We're the lucky ones. We got to be born into this. And not sinful Gentiles, those pagan Gentiles, they're not Jews. I mean, we're welcoming them. They're not as good. Again, just hear his sarcasm because this was a mindset of some of those Jews. He goes, no, that a person is not justified by the works of the law. The word justified means not guilty. He goes, God's not looking at people saying not guilty because of the law. No. It's by faith in Jesus. It's about the cross. It's about what Jesus did, not about what they did or didn't do. It's not about the law. It's all about Jesus. It's by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. It has nothing to do with the law. We've been freed from this. So why are we requiring Gentiles to be circumcised, have a surgery to become Jews because that's what the law required? No. Jesus. It's about Jesus. Can you feel the tension? The church was at a tipping point. And Paul is just calling church leaders to say, hey, we got to lead through this. And Cephas, Peter, I can't have you being afraid. I need you to lead with us. Well, that letter gets written and distributed before we get to chapter 15. And guess what? Those letters got passed around, not just to the churches in Galatia, they got passed around everywhere. And so by the time we get to chapter 15, the tension had hit a pinnacle. So the church leaders were like, we got to pull everyone together. And so we're told that Paul and Barnabas were appointed along with some other believers to go up to Jerusalem to see the apostles and the elders, the other spiritual leaders about the question. So they called everyone together, and we get this first kind of church council picture of the leaders within the church. And the apostles were there. We even see that there's Pharisees, the Jewish religious leaders that wanted Jesus crucified. They're now Christ followers. And there's this group of church leaders all gathered together, and Paul and Barnabas are called in. And all of a sudden, this group of circumcised believers, the Judaizers, are stand up, and they just go, this is what this is all about. The Gentiles must be circumcised and required to keep the law of Moses. They drew the line. And we're told that the apostles and the elders met to consider this question. And after much discussion, Peter stands up. Now, I don't know, and there much discussion as they were discussing how to lead forward, what the decision was going to look like, how they're going to lead all the leaders and the churches through this. I don't know if they're like, hey, Peter, you've kind of made a mess of things. I mean, Paul's right there. Everyone knew what he wrote in the letter of Galatia. Everyone knew that he had called him out to his face in front of the church. Like, this is, I don't know if they're like, hey, Peter, you need to talk, or if Peter himself, I think it's the latter. I think Peter himself, just like, hey, I need to step up. You're right, I backed away. I was a coward. I was afraid. And I'm going to step up. I'm going to lead through the mess that I've helped create. And so Peter steps up. And he starts to tell everyone, hey, do you remember the vision I had and the sheet and the unclean and clean animals? And God's like, hey, everything's clean. And part of the story where I traveled to Caesarea Maritima and I met with Cornelius and sat down in a Gentile's home. And do you remember when I traveled to Jerusalem and shared with some of you that were criticizing me? I told you about what God had told me and what the vision God gave me, and everything was good. And so Peter just points people back to say, hey, do you remember all of this? And then Peter says these words. Now then, why do you try to test God by putting on the necks of Gentiles a yoke, a weight that restricted, a piece of wood that would bind, a yoke that neither we nor our ancestors have not been able to bear? We haven't been able to live up to the law. None of us have. None of us in this room, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, none of us have been able to live up to this. So why would we want to do this to the Gentiles? And then Peter emphatically says, no. No. We believe that it's through the grace of our Lord Jesus that we're saved, just as we are. It's by grace, through faith, in Jesus. That's salvation. That's it. Nothing more to add. By grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. And we're told that the whole assembly became silent as they listened to Barnabas and Paul telling about, they were sharing stories about, personal stories, about interactions that they have had with who? With Gentiles that had come to faith in Jesus, whose lives have been completely changed because of Jesus. And after they listened to story after story after story, all of a sudden James, the brother of Jesus, stands up. And James points everyone back to some words that the Old Testament prophet Amos said. He's like, hey, the prophets were talking about this. We just missed it. But now it's clear. And then James says some of the most important words when it comes to the mission of the church. James says, it is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for Gentiles who are turning to God. Let's not make it difficult. It's not complicated. Let's remove the barriers for people to come and place their faith and trust in Jesus. It's not complicated. Let's not make it difficult. And then James adds one, and this is more like just like wise spiritual leadership of how to navigate cultural issues. This is what he says. Instead, we should write to them and telling them to abstain from food polluted to idols, from sexual immorality, from the meat strangled animals, and from blood. And you might be like, what? That feels like a left turn. Here's what James is doing. Hey, there's still some tension between Jews and Gentiles when it comes to this food thing. Yes, everything's clean. But for the Gentiles, like some of their pagan worship practices, they would have sacrifices in the temple, and then that food would be sold in the market. And what James and the other spiritual leaders were like, hey, Gentiles, can you just be a good neighbor? Can you just understand that the Jews are coming along on this clean, unclean food thing? They're coming along, but this is generational. Can you just kind of meet in the middle? Let's not allow the food to divide. And oh, by the way, sexual immorality, the covenant of marriage, it's a big deal. Why? Because covenant is a big deal to God. I've shared these tools before, tools that I pull out of the toolbox, not just for this series, but every weekend when we teach, that we will want to help construct a clear biblical framework. We want to challenge perceptions and perspectives, and we want to coach how to process, how to respond, right? The coaching process is say, hey, we're all, the word justification is all about God through Jesus on the cross saying you're not guilty. When you place your faith and trust in him, you're not guilty. Another big word is sanctification. That's the pursuit. Pursuing, living a life reflecting Jesus. And that's the pursuit we're all on. Until the day we're in heaven with God. I'm just telling you, that's the pursuit. Always working and trying to figure out and repenting and turning back and realizing that we don't have it all figured out and just trying to live a life that reflects and honors Jesus. And so as I thought through this story, and especially when it comes to the health of the church, there's a couple of insights I just want to pull in that I think will help protect the unity of the church, will help when messy things happen within the church that we together can lead through it. The first one is to stay humble. And the only way that you and me can stay humble is we got to slay pride. Pride is lurking in the shadows within all of us. Pride is in all of us. It just is. The writer of Proverbs said, pride comes before destruction. In fact, spiritual pride is the number one destructive force within the church. It just is. Why? Because pride is so hard to see. It's so easy to see in other people, but so difficult to see within ourselves. And so there's just some areas that maybe will just well up within you when it comes to pride. Again, it's in all of us. For you to maybe start discerning where is the pride working within you. Because if you work on slaying pride, you're going to stay humble. An area that maybe, just maybe, might be reflecting that there's some pride growing within you is maybe you just think you're superior spiritually. You find yourself going, well, I would never act like that. I would never talk like that. I wouldn't have made a decision like that. I wouldn't treat my spouse like that. I would never have made that decision with my kids. When you start to just feel superior in your spirituality, again, just might be pride. You see, pride is all about shoving people down to puff ourselves up. It's really the simple definition, and it's the most revealing. When we have thoughts or we say things that just shoves people down and it just puffs us up, and it happens spiritually. Are you having some of those thoughts within you that you just feel, again, you wouldn't say this out loud? That's the thing with pride. But it's those thoughts that come in our brain. My encouragement for you, you should just call yourself out. When those thoughts come out, like, man, that's filth. I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe I said that. Oh, yeah, I can't believe because we're all sinners saved by Jesus. His grace covers it all. Do you find yourself becoming defensive? If someone kind of holds you accountable or someone challenges you, do you find you just bowing up? Whether you become defensive out loud or it's just all within you, but you feel you're like, how dare you? I mean, I could tear you apart. I know, like, you're not really good in that area and you didn't do that right. Like, you just want to become defensive. It just might be some pride growing within you and you just need to slay it. Maybe for you, it's look at me. You just want the spotlight on you. You want the praise. Now, we all want encouragement. Right? We all want high fives. I'm not talking about that. You know what I'm talking about. When you find places to serve, when you find places to lead, why? Because you want more people to know about you. It's a look at me. And one closely tied to it is it's about me. That you think serving is all about you. I mean, Jesus said serving is about scrubbing feet. That's serving. If you want to see if it's about me as pride, do something you don't want to do. Do something you don't feel called to do. You don't feel gifted to do. I mean, we in the church use all those buzzwords that really is about pride. But we wrap our spiritual superiority around it. Maybe for you, it's just an unteachable spirit. That's why I love this story with Peter and Paul. Paul hits some tension within Peter, calls him out. But then we see Peter leading leaders, calling himself out. Do you have a teachable spirit? Or maybe it's just constant criticism. You're just criticizing everything. You're criticizing church stuff. You're criticizing your boss, your school, your teacher, your coach, your everyone. You just have a spirit of criticism. You're not coming beside people to help something become better. You're just sitting on the sidelines pointing it all out, and it just might be pride. You got to slay pride to stay humble. Where is the pride within you? Another way is to share stories. Again, I love this moment with the church council. Barnabas and Paul just started to share stories after stories about what God is doing. Stories lift your eyes up out of the mess, out of the tension, to keep focused on the mission, the gospel, the good news about what God is doing in and through his church. The more stories you share, the more stories that you share, your story, other stories of what God is doing, I'm just telling you, it keeps focused on mission. Seek unity. Seek unity. Paul made it clear. I went to Peter face to face. Yeah, tense conversation, difficult conversation, all that's true. But it's protecting the unity of the church so we could lead together. Jesus in John 17 prayed for the unity of the church. Why? So that people who don't know him would lead into the church, because they'll see how the church chooses to lead in tension, in division. And we have to stand on mission. Got to stand on mission. Stand on mission. That's the foundation. Jesus. What he did on the cross. Stand on mission. It's by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. Let's pray. Lord, I just ask that we'll hold tightly to that we'll be self-reflective within ourselves, and that Lord, we'll hold on to the mission that you've placed upon your church, and that we will courageously lead. In your name I pray. Amen.